I'm in the Wellwood Cemetery in East Farmingdale. I might consider this Babylon. I'm here to tell you the story of Julius and Ethel Rosenberg. It's a case that you might be familiar with from the 1950s. They were American citizens, Julius and Ethel Rosenberg, who were convicted of spying on behalf of the Soviet Union. The couple was accused of providing top secret information about radar, sonar, jet propulsion engines, and other valuable nuclear weapon designs. At the time, the United States was the only country in the world with nuclear weapons. They were convicted of espionage in 1951. They were executed by the federal government in 1953. Julius was born in 1918. Ethel was born in 1915. Julius 35, the age of death. Ethel 37, the age of death. Both by electric chair. Other convicted co-conspirators were sentenced to prison. Ethel's brother, David Greenglass, made a plea agreement. Harry Gold, German scientist, Klaus Voss, a German scientist, was convicted in the United Kingdom. For many decades, the Rosenberg sons, Michael and Robert, many other defenders maintained that Julius and Ethel were innocent of spying on the country and were victims of Cold War paranoia. After the fall of the Soviet Union, much information concerning them was declassified, including a trove of decoded Soviet cables. In January 1950, the U.S. discovered that Klaus Fuchs, it was spelled F-U-C-S, a German refugee physicist working for the British mission in the Manhattan Project, had given key documents to the Soviets throughout the war. He identified his courier as an American Harry Gold, who was arrested in 1950. Gold confessed and identified David Greenglass as an additional source. In 1950, Greenglass was arrested by the FBI for espionage and soon confessed to having passed secret information to the USSR through Gold. He also claimed that his sister, Ethel's husband, Julius Rosenberg, had convinced David's wife, Ruth, to recruit him while visiting in Albuquerque, New Mexico. He said that Julius had secrets and thus linked him to the Soviet contact agent Anatoly Yakovlev. This connection would be necessary as evidence if there was to be a conviction for espionage of the Rosenbergs. July 17th, 1950, he was arrested on suspicion of espionage as Julius, based on David Greenglass, his confession. On August 11th, 1950, Ethel was arrested after testifying before a grand jury. It took 10 days for the case against Ethel Rosenberg. The case against Ethel Rosenberg was resolved 10 days before the start of the trial, actually. When David and Ruth Greenglass were interviewed a second time, they were persuaded to change their original stories, which they did. After being interviewed the second time, he said they had given this information to Julius in the living room of the Rosenbergs' New York apartment. Ethel, at Julius's request, had taken his notes and typed them up. In the re-interview, Ruth Greenglass expanded on her husband's story. August 11th, Rosenberg testified before the grand jury. For all questions, she asserted her right not to answer. That's part of the Fifth Amendment. Her attorney asked the commissioner to parole her in his custody over the weekend so that she could make arrangements for the two young children. The request was denied. August 17th, both Julius and Ethel were indicted. March of 1951, they were convicted of espionage. Sentenced to death on April 5th under Section 2 of the Espionage Act of 1917, which provides that anyone convicted of transmitting or attempting to transmit to a foreign government information relating to a national defense may be imprisoned or put to death. They imposed not only that he and the Rosenbergs were responsible for espionage, but also for American deaths in the Korean War, which is why they imposed the death penalty. A lot of people were trying to bring them clemency. The Pope was one of them. Albert Einstein, another one, did not work. Pope Pius appealed to President Eisenhower. Spared a couple. Not to be. June of 1953, Julius died after the first injection of the electric shock, rather. Ethel's execution didn't go smoothly. She was given 3 electric shocks that she was not dead after that. 2 more shots were implied, and witnesses reported that smoke rose from her head. The course of the funeral, 500 people attended while some 10,000 stood outside during the funeral services. The Rosenbergs were the only 2 American civilians to be executed for espionage-related activity during the Cold War. A case that made national headlines. Were they wrongly convicted? Wrongly accused?
Spies Julius and Ethel Rosenberg appealed their sentence of death, and 4 times they were unsuccessful. They will be executed tonight, probably within the next half hour, the first husband and wife to die in the electric chair.
Inside the stone walls of Sing Sing prison, the Rosenbergs wait all day for word of their fate. It's now more than 2 years since they were first sentenced to die for organizing atomic espionage for Russia. Rabbi Irving Kozlow, a prison chaplain, goes in. He will not leave until after the execution, which is being held before sundown because the setting of the sun this Friday marks the beginning of the Holy Sabbath in the Jewish calendar. A matron, Mamie Creighton, comes out after seeing Ethel Rosenberg. She says the woman refuses to believe she's going to die, insists she is innocent. State troopers surround the prison to prevent demonstrations. Again, there are none. The hours pass slowly. Julius Rosenberg, now 35, his wife Ethel, now 37, married 14 years and 1 day, parents of 2 boys, tonight dined on hard-boiled eggs, macaroni salad, and tea. There was no time for the usual last meal. Their fate is decided in Washington. And here is that story from David Brinkley.
In these last minutes before the Rosenbergs are electrocuted at Sing Sing prison, here's how in Washington today their attorneys went through the last possible legal maneuvers to save them. It began at noon at the Supreme Court. Normally quiet, but today surrounded by groups of the curious. The court met at noon. At 12:06, it announced a decision to end the Rosenberg stay of execution. That was a stay granted 2 days ago by Justice Douglas. That seemed to be the end, but it wasn't. Their attorneys promptly asked for another stay while they appealed to President Eisenhower again for clemency. The court said it would consider it. Meanwhile, the lobbyists who came to Washington to work for the Rosenbergs kept up their parade in front of the White House. People riding by in automobiles shouted and asked why they didn't go to Russia. But there was no other disorder, so the police left them alone. They even sang a little song somebody wrote especially for this occasion, but the picketing and singing did them no good. Because at the Supreme Court by this time, the government's lawyers, having won their case, were leaving. The court had refused again to delay the execution. A few minutes later, Emanuel Bloch, chief counsel, came out, read us a telegram he had sent to the president.
For sake of American tradition, prestige, and influence, urge redress for Rosenberg. Demand you be afforded sufficient time to consider this serious matter.
The president's answer came quickly. Here it is, read by a White House press officer.
The following is part of a statement just issued by the President of the United States. I am convinced that the only conclusion to be drawn from the history of this case is that the Rosenbergs have received the benefit of every safeguard which American justice can provide. There is no question in my mind that their original trial and the long series of appeals constitute the fullest measure of justice and due process of law. Throughout the innumerable complications and technicalities of this case, no judge has ever expressed any doubt that they committed most serious acts of espionage. Accordingly, only most extraordinary circumstances could warrant executive intervention in the case. When democracy's enemies have been judged guilty of a crime as horrible as that of which the Rosenbergs were convicted, when the legal processes of democracy have been marshaled to their maximum strength to protect the lives of convicted spies, when in their most solemn judgment the tribunals of the United States have adjudged them guilty and the sentence just,